Good morning. It's April 13th, 2019. Just going to give a little tour of my maple sap boiling operation here. What we've got here is a little frame shed I built a month or so ago. I got this evaporator and firebox here, firebox and pan from a guy in Lincoln. I've got a chafing dish or chafing pan that I used last year on top of a wood stove here to sort of sit on top of the pan, get warmed up by the steam and whatnot. When this starts to boil down, I ladle stuff out of the warming pan into the hot pan, and then I've got a number of buckets of sap here on the side. Those are all full buckets. I've got probably 8 or so more out in the woods and a lot on the trees still to collect. But this is all just 2x4s, pretty lightweight, 6 mil poly, maybe 4 mil poly and laths to keep it dryish. A little cupola sort of thing on top to let the steam out. Got all that stovepipe at EBS and Princeton Variety, cinder blocks at Princeton Variety. But yeah, just every so often I check the water levels, sap levels. That's the door here. Add some firewood. It's just getting started. It's probably 7 o'clock right now. I started the fire about 30 minutes ago. That top pan holds a 5-gallon pail. Right now there's about 15 gallons in this pan. I like to keep it shallow because it boils faster, and I've heard that the less depth there is, the more efficiently it boils. I don't know how true that is, but that's the theory I'm going on. It does mean that I have to pay attention to it. I can't just walk away, but you wouldn't want to do that anyway with a fire going. I've got a stack of fresh wood ready to go into the boiler, into the firebox when the time comes. Got some stuff across the field, across the way here, across the road to collect, bring it back in the jet sled and put in when this pile gets low, which it will get low. I'll probably go through, I don't know, 3 or 4 times this much before I'm done. I've got some longer birch lengths here that I cut last fall. They're not super dry, they're not super wet, they're not great, but mixed in with the dry wood, I'm hoping they'll get me through the day and be able to finish the boiling here. At the end of the day, I've got probably 100 gallons of sap between what I've collected here in buckets over the hill, and in the buckets and jugs on the trees. I probably get 100 gallons or so, give or take 5 gallons. The idea is to boil it down and get 10 or 11 quarts of syrup. It's nothing fancy on the front. I just get a tarp, lath tacked into place with a lath, and just weighted down with an iron bar. It's pretty ugly, but it's a temporary sugar shack. It's not anything permanent. I do hope to build something more permanent someday, but this was pretty easy to throw up in a few days, and I've been really happy with it. We had some super high winds, and it didn't affect the shack, aside from shifting it a little bit on the cinder blocks it's sitting on. So I was glad that even with some 40-mile-an-hour gusts, it stayed in place. But throughout the day, I'm going to be going out in the field, going into the sugar bush and gathering more sap. And we'll see by the end of the day what we end up with. I like to keep track of the progress here. We've got a clipboard with our info, and if it gets dark, we plug in the light, when the sun goes down. I expect to probably be working on this about 7:05 or so right now. I expect to work on this till probably midnight or so when the final tally, and should be a good bounty. This is the last sap run of the season. It may run a little more. The weather doesn't look like it's going to be great for sap, but it may run a little more. It's not going to get freezing overnight, so it's not going to be too great. And I think the buds will start coming out, and it won't be a great flavor on the sap. That's what I understand anyway. Also, we've already got 6.5 gallons. We're going to come out with close to 10 by the end of this. So I'm done with it. It's long days, it's hard work. It's fun, but we've got enough for the year. So I'm gonna wrap it up and call it a day, call it a season, and that'll be that. All right, it's the end of the day. Had about 20 buckets, 100 gallons. It's the last stages of boiling down. Sap's gotten really dark. Warming pan's got sap that's fresh from the bucket. Pretty clear, a little bit of a tint to it, a little hard to see now. But this is the remains of the other 98 gallons of sap that have been mostly evaporated. I'd say there's probably still about 10 or 15 gallons in the pan that have got to be boiled down, and probably a gallon or two in the warming pan that are going to go into it. But it's going to be the home stretch on the outside evaporator. When it's gotten dark out, it's probably 7:30 or so p.m. and really kind of wait for it to wrap up. Then the next step will be to take it inside, finish it up on the stove top, and go from there. The goal will be to get about 10 quarts out of it. We'll know that we're almost done by the time it boils down to that volume. So still a long ways to go. I expect again to be finished up around midnight or so. We'll see. If we're lucky, this will boil off really well on the boiler here. There won't be a whole ton left to do on the stove top. But it's tricky. There's a lot of surface area on the pan here, so you can't let it get too low out here. You really have to wind up with almost 10 gallons to just keep the bottom covered. So the problem is when you get that low outside, it's really prone to burning off the pan. When things are done, I'll open up the firebox, throw some water over the flame, try to put it out without kicking out too much smoke and ash out the front, and then take the back of the evaporator pan here, put it up on a block so it's tilted forward, and siphon off from the drain what sap's left over into a stainless steel pot, and then take that inside to boil off. But things are going all right. I've gone through a lot of wood today. This is really hopefully the last little stretch for the outside wood, and then we'll be done. But well on the way to having over 2 gallons of finished syrup when the day's done. Alright, so this is the last step of boiling outside. The evaporator pan is probably about a ½ inch or lower in that one spot. It's not completely level and not completely even, so it's a little deeper in the front than it is in the back. But 100 gallons boiled down to this is probably 5 gallons or less in the pan. I'm almost ready to put the fire out and drain it off at the front. That will be the end of this step, and on to the finishing off on the stove top or a burner. And then we'll have a couple gallons. Hey, I'm just going to get a quick look at the area where I put in my taps and the maple trees. This is over the top of the hill across the street from the house. And this kind of, these tracks here are what we call Rex's ruts. Just kind of real wet area. One time our neighbor came down here with a skidder and left some ruts, so now we call it Rex's ruts. This is the north side. And this is the first year I've done a lot inside the woods there on the north side. Past years I've tapped the trees on the edges of the ruts, north side here. But I never really went inside and beyond. This year I've done quite a bit in here, and there's a real productive area. There's a lot of maple trees in here. Not a ton of huge ones, but plenty of trees. I put in a lot of drop lines and some buckets. The trees here are pretty good. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I'd say I've got about half, a little more than half my taps out here on this side. You can see that jug's almost full. I emptied it yesterday. Sorry, almost half full rather. But it's a good area. And it goes all the way down a hill here. And got some buckets and jugs and stuff scattered around. Bigger trees, I've got a couple taps. These are the smaller tree saver taps. So I don't mind having a couple taps in a sort of medium-sized tree. Along the edge of the ruts here, these trees get a lot of sunlight early in the season, and they're generally really good producers. It doesn't have a tap at the moment because of a brush pile at the bottom. The big issue out here is access. When the snow is deep, it can be hard to get out here with a vehicle. Because the buckets are so heavy once they're full, the 5-gallon pails are so heavy to manage when they're full, it's really not worth the trouble unless you can get a four-wheeler or a snowmobile or something like that out to help collect the sap. They're just really, it's exhausting to try to walk it around any more than a little bit to get to, say, the sled, the jet sled to carry the buckets out of the woods. It's even nicer if you can get a trailer in, but most years it's just too snowy. It helps to have some snow, but too much snow is a real problem. So there's Rex's ruts, that's the top, there's the four-wheeler up the top there. And they go down east to west down the hill. There's a lot of very skinny maples in here. They don't get a ton of sun, and so I haven't really bothered tapping them, but maybe in the future if I run sap lines I might look into it. This is the south side of Rex's ruts. In here I've got mostly, well, entirely hanging buckets. This is the first year I did these blue buckets from Leader, and I've been really happy with them. They're sturdy, they hold a lot of sap, and that means they don't generally overflow unless it's a very heavy day or I don't get to check it for a day or two. But this area has got very good production as well. Different trees produce at different rates in different years, but this has always been a pretty good spot. But this is how I get all my sap for boiling down. I've got about 50 taps in, I've got 25 pails, these blue buckets here, and 25 plus jugs and water bottles and things like that with the drop lines. And I've been really happy with how this year's gone. It is a lot of work to come in here and empty each bucket, but when the sap's running good, it's very exciting to fill up 5-gallon pails and to have stuff to boil down later. It can be a little anxiety inducing to have more sap than you can handle. It feels wasteful to have these buckets overflow or the jugs overflow, but not a bad problem to have is too much sap. I've got about almost 25-gallon pails to store it, but I think next year I'll do things a little differently. I'll get a storage tank or something like that, so I'm not such an issue with overflowing. I may also run some sap lines so that I'm not always walking through the woods. May have something that runs downhill into a collection tank or something like that, but we'll see. But this is the area. There's a lot more potential. There's a lot more maples. Some of the bigger trees in this area are actually poplars, so I may take those out to remove some of the shade on the maple trees. But it's a really nice spot. I've been doing syrup for 3 or 4 years now, and it's just been a ton of fun. And the end product is great. You get something that you made yourself, that came out of your trees and your work, and I'm happy to do it every year. I'm really looking forward to next season and how I'll improve things and all the fun. But for now, I'm glad to be done with it. It is a ton of work. So